There's some crazy woke ideology even in the courts. I want to read you a story from CBS News, and the headline just a couple days ago: trans women can compete in USA powerlifting, ruling says. I'll read a little bit of the article. Transgender women can now compete in USA powerlifting after a court ruled in favor of athlete J.C. Cooper, who filed a discrimination case against the federation after she was banned from competing in women's events. It's very confusing how journalists put she there. And in your mind's eye, you're thinking, oh, she, what does she look like? But the less clever news actually show photos of these fellas. Let me read an excerpt in CBS from the judge, and this will just get you going. The judge wrote that while the USA Powerlifting focused on the notion of fairness in its decision to bar trans women from competition, citing an unfair advantage, quote, the USA Powerlifting's evidence of competitive advantage does not take into account any competitive disadvantage a transgender athlete might face from, for example, increased risk of depression and suicide, lack of access to coaching and practice facilities, or other performance. Those have got nothing to do with strength and powerlifting. That's a judge trying to daydream. Well, sure, this guy is 2-3 times stronger than these women, but he might be depressed. Did you think of that? He might be suicidal. Did you think? Like, that's not science. That's not law. That's extremist politics and a judge who's looking to make a headline for himself. It's not going to be fun anymore. It's not sport anymore.
Well, it's just outright insulting, as if women's sports is supposed to be somehow the template or mechanism for social therapy, somebody who is so suicidal. What in the world? Are we using women's sports really as a therapy session now for some male-born person who just decides that, they're going to claim that somehow if they're not allowed to unfairly win against female athletes, that somehow we're all responsible for what they might do to themselves? It seems like a very childish demand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of this is some sort of therapy. I mean, I think a convincing theory about the Kayla Lemieux teacher who goes into shop class with these absurd prosthetic breasts is that being that is some sort of a sexually soothing or exciting for him to do, to parade around and have people look at him like that. Like, it's all a form of narcissistic therapy, all of this. And in the past, it would be unacceptable. Now it's unacceptable if you speak out against it. In Calgary last week, a Christian pastor was jailed for objecting to a drag queen story hour. But our prime minister had something to say about this, and I think it was on International Women's Day. Let me quote Justin Trudeau's tweet. With a disturbing rise in anti-transgender hate here in Canada and around the world recently, I want to be very clear about one more thing. Trans women are women. We will always stand up to this hate whenever and wherever it occurs. So if you think that someone born a man is not a woman, if you think 2 + 2 is 4 and not 5, you are full of hate. You heard it from the Prime Minister himself. You either support this radical relabeling of words, destruction of the meaning, or you're a hater. Which one are you? Are you for this, or are you a transphobe? Trudeau wants to know. What do you make of that?
Well, I can tell you this, Ezra. For the Prime Minister to say that on International Women's Day is absolutely disrespectful and hateful towards female-born persons in Canada. There is a sex-based distinction between males and females. And for the Prime Minister to pretend like that doesn't exist is a denial of things that would entice people in his government and other organizations across the country to establish laws and policies that literally discriminate against biological women on the basis of sex. So shame on the Prime Minister. This should never have been said, especially on International Women's Day.
Yeah. And I've talked to Barbara Kay about this before. At the end of that South Park episode, you saw Randy the Macho Man Savage standing in first place and natural women in second and third. And in fact, even the cover of your book, Unsporting, there's a trans athlete in first place and then dejected women in second and third. But how long will it be, really, before first, second, and third are all trans athletes? Like, why not? And how long will it be before all the competitors in powerlifting are men? And the reason I say that is, no matter how hard a female athlete trains, just in terms of genetics and testosterone and muscle mass and things like that, you have to go through a lot of male athletes before you get to the strongest female athlete. And that's not a knock. That's just an observation. And why would there just be one Leah Thomas swimmer? Why would there just be one JC powerlifter? And I think what you're going to see very shortly is the total extinction of women in sports, at least those sports, which is many of them, where strength and muscle mass and power and force are determinative. If you allow trans athletes into a sport, it is only a matter of time before there are no women left. We're just in the very early days of this. That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest, either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.